Each year, Microsoft Research hosts hundreds of influential speakers from around the world, including leading scientists, renowned experts in technology, book authors, and leading academics, and makes videos of these lectures freely available.
Afternoon. My name is Curtis Wong, and I'm a principal researcher here at Microsoft Research. And it's a great pleasure to introduce Bruce Nussbaum here. I think if I had to associate Bruce with a sort of word tag cloud, there would be words like writer, innovation, creativity, inspiration, words like that. I mean, I think they sort of characterize what I think about Bruce when I first met him, actually. Bruce is a former assistant editor at Business Week. He's a professor of innovation and design at the Parsons School in New York. And he also blogs at Fast Company and Harvard Business Review. And he's also the person behind the International Design Excellence Award and the World's Most Innovative Companies Survey. But I think my favorite thing about him in his bio is that he was in the Peace Corps and he taught science to third graders in the Philippines. And I think that really sort of tells you a little bit about who Bruce is. And I really am really thrilled to welcome my friend Bruce Nussbaum.
Thank you. It's significant, right, that I keep that in my bio. A lot of people ask me, why do you put that in your bio? That's the reason. So, is it okay? Well, a couple of things. I didn't know what to wear to talk to you guys, and I got a lot of, wear a sports jacket. Wear a sports jacket with blue jeans, but wear the kind of blue jeans that, cost $300, not the kind you wear, Levi's. So I decided to wear black jeans because I come from New York and just wanted a signifier. We all wear black in New York. And then I decided to wear this sweater, which my wife's mother made. It's one of my most precious possessions. Every Christmas for 20 years, she would send a sweater. And her name was Lucy. She was from Portland, Oregon, so I spent a lot of time in Portland. And it was a ritual. And it was, in many ways, as important as Christmas was to me. It made Christmas. And it also showed me how important, it showed me how important certain rituals are as pathways into meaning for people and for cultures. So I learned that from Lucy and her collection, and I decided to wear it. So there's that. Here I am. Just looking around, I wasn't sure. There are some companies and there are some industries I know really well and can put together a presentation that is deeply detailed and insightful. I don't know Microsoft all that well, although, as you could see here, it did change my life, and I'll talk to you about that a little bit. I know a little bit more about Microsoft ever since I met Bill Buxton a bunch of years ago. And hi, Bill. I hope you're watching. And he told me all about everything in life, actually, if you know Bill, including how to make a Cree canoe using traditional Cree instruments in a traditional Cree way. And I've yet to see that canoe, but I've heard a lot about it. And then I talked with Curtis this morning, or this afternoon, for a long time, for the first time, and learned a lot about what's going on here. And it's fascinating and actually validating because it reinforced a lot of what I'm going to present. But it's not represented in the presentation. So what I would like to do, and I'm looking around, and most of us here are not 21, so we've probably been through this a lot, right? You've had a lot of presentations. I've certainly been there listening to people. So I think the value that we're going to get out of today will probably happen in the engagement and conversation that comes after the presentation. And so what I'd like to do is start off with a couple of provocations written as provocations, go into my presentation, and then come out of it and have a conversation with you all and see if we can come up with something interesting and spend an hour together. Is that okay? Okay, so we'll do that. So I've already told you about my dress. At Parsons, I teach at Parsons, which is a marvelous place. And it began as a fashion school. And it's still about a half fashion. I don't teach in that part of it. I teach in the School of Design Strategies. But I get a lot of grad students from fashion. And I have to say, you know, I spent a lot of years at Business Week covering design and innovation. Fashion students are amazing in their understanding of culture and meaning and their work. You know, they have to, in terms of a business model, they produce 2 collections a year. They put together a project team for each collection. They have to perform. They have to get on a runway. They have to create, and then they also have to produce. As they're creating, they have to, if they sell their stuff, they're also making it. It is capitalism in the raw. So we have this image of sort of frou-frou fashion, whereas up close and personal, they have a lot to teach us. And as one of my students, I have a lot of British students, she said, well, we wrap the body. Okay? We wrap the body. And I sort of looked at her and said, people are, I can't do this, so I'll back to my American. People are born naked. And the first thing that happens to them is that they're wrapped in cloth. You know? That's the beginning of fashion. And it's like, whoa. So after that, I really respect them. And that's all I'm going to say about fashion. Okay, so let me begin with just a series of provocations and things that we will talk about, if you want to talk about it, later on. So, number one, provocation. Big data is like cultural anthropology, only less insightful. Okay. Multidisciplinary teams are usually not that creative because they are too smoothly integrated. What we need today are anti-disciplinary teams. Okay. The high-tech innovation model of beta testing is inherently wasteful, tragic, nasty, and archaic. You engage with people way too late in the cycle. Okay, these are provocations. I'm beginning to see people getting provoked. Maybe it's scaring me. There is no difference between data-driven people and culture-driven people. They both seek the same thing, which is meaning. Okay. and they are both cultures themselves. Okay. Marissa Myers is both right and wrong. Okay. The concept of user experience is dead. A new concept, user engagement, is born. I only have 3 more. Social media is peaking, like globalization, opening up new opportunities for Microsoft and for anyone else who wants to seek them. And the final one is, it's not just user needs or wants or even delight that's important. It's deep meaning, deep cultural meaning. That's the key. And that's what's important. Okay, those are my provocations. I'm going to take a little water here and then get into it. So, first off, I do want to thank Microsoft for changing my life. And I'm not kidding. I wanted to be a writer ever since I was a kid. At first, I wanted to be an astronaut. Okay, that's true. But I was told that you couldn't be an astronaut if you had glasses. So that was out. Then I wanted to be a fireman. But I was told I couldn't be a fireman if I was short. and I was relatively short as a kid. Then I wanted to be a farmer, but I was told you couldn't be a farmer if you were a New Yorker and Jewish. So then I became a writer, and that seemed to work really well. But writing has never been easy for me. It's actually been very hard for me. It was really hard because I started writing in this age. I started writing on typewriters. Now, typewriters are really hot. I don't know if they're hot in Seattle. They're really hot in New York now, in Brooklyn. They cost $300, $400, $500 to refurbish, and I understand why they're hot. And we could talk about the effort to slow down and the effort to move back to a mechanical, visceral, tactile thing. But for me, my mind was always racing faster than my hands could carry me. And, I'd have all these thoughts and these ideas, and I just couldn't get it down. And it was incredibly frustrating. I always felt like I was about to burst and scream. So it didn't stop me from writing. And in fact, this is my first cover story, Did Christ Have a Crew Cut? I think I was 21 when I did this. And I read it the other day. I was looking for an image, and this was the first cover story I ever did. So, and I read it, and it has really ferocious left-wing fervor. It was very anti-war. And it, as I was reading it, it's happening to me now. I'm getting hot and anxious over remembering the process of getting that out, because I had so many great ideas and I couldn't get them down, and it drove me crazy. So, but it didn't stop me from being a writer. After the Peace Corps, and I started doing this, in the Peace Corps, I went to Ann Arbor, and I spent my 100 years in grad school in everything. Mostly anthropology, sociology, political science, that side. I was writing around that time, and that is when a couple of guys, Bill Gates and Paul Allen, did something that allowed me to integrate my hands and my mind. Through them and through Microsoft, I was able to finally end this antagonism between my mind and my hands. I was able to get down on paper almost as fast, if not faster, my thoughts. To me, what they produced, the Office, the operating system, it wasn't software to me. And they were not products, and they certainly weren't code. And it wasn't about efficiency. And they didn't just meet a need. It met, more of an aspiration. To get my thoughts down on a page as fast as I could think them, Microsoft had great resonance. It had deep meaning for me. And Bill and Paul created something that beckoned me. It pulled me in. I used it all the time. It engaged me. I never wanted to let it go. It was about passion. It was about emotion. It was about engagement. It was about aura. It was about love. It was, it was that level and that meaningful to me. So I wanted to begin the story about how Microsoft saved me so that I might perhaps help you all here at Microsoft. I know Microsoft doesn't need saving like Apple needs saving these days as it loses its aura. But I'd like to suggest a few things that might increase the success rate for Microsoft's model of innovation if they're adapted. Some of the things that I talk about in my book, Creative Intelligence. And the mistakes made in such things as the Segway, or Halo, or the Newton, or I would say the whole Genome Project. All were great inventions, all great technologies, all proved to be wildly expensive failures. The genome is still out. So here's a provocation, another one. Microsoft has a model of innovation that is truly archaic. I know you believe otherwise, but hear me out. Microsoft's model of innovation is simple. Engineers come up with cool shit and throw it over the wall. Developers, designers, and marketers and creatives get a chance to dress up that technology. This is very much a West Coast, Silicon Valley beta testing model of innovation. Do the tech first and offer it to consumers. Offer it as a gift. Some people call it a push model of innovation. I like to call it a gift model of innovation. And as anyone who's ever given a gift on Valentine's Day knows, it can be problematic. Sometimes it works and sometimes it really doesn't. Should I give her or him cash and let them buy what they really need and want because I can't quite figure it out or don't want to? Will I get it right? Will she get it right? It's fraught with tension. So the gift model of innovation has been around a long time. And clearly it works, especially for successful startup companies, where the founder's vision embodies the desires and values of the founder's audience. It works when the product beckons and calls you to engage and return to it again and again and again, like my engagement with Microsoft when I was starting out as a writer. But when founders leave, visions often fade, the connection with people sometimes erodes, and the beckoning ends. The process of innovation, throwing gifts of innovation over the wall, that continues and becomes routine. But very often you're throwing gifts into someone else's vision. So you switch to a fast follower strategy. And you're throwing gifts over the wall, again, into someone else's vision. Sometimes it works, and sometimes it doesn't. Now, the Japanese electronics companies in the 70s and 80s, they did this. This was what they did. Their engineers were fantastic. They came up with the most incredible functionality, and they crammed it all in to the wonderful remotes that I think Bill Buxton still has some of these remotes. I remember getting the first one for my VCR. It had like 100 buttons. Literally, it had 100 buttons on it. And of course, most people only used 2 or 3, and it drove them crazy. But they still wanted to use their VCR. So in the end, the Japanese, Sony in particular, listened and simplified. And Sony in those days was smart enough to know what it didn't know. And the question for everyone today, including Microsoft, is, are we smart enough to know what we don't know? Do we care enough to find out? So let me offer an alternative model of innovation that begins with meaning, not with technology. At its core, any brand is the commodification of what is meaningful to people. So I'm going to say that one more time. At its core, any brand is simply the commodification of what is meaningful to its audience. Now, Microsoft, like most tech companies, is really good at understanding what it's meaningful to its own cohort. Okay? Its engineering and developer communities and a slice of Gen Y and some other demographics. I use the term knowledge mining in my book to describe how we prospect for and mine meaning. And one way to mine meaning is to mine what we embody. And I think engineers in particular, I'm looking out here, I can't tell who's an engineer, who's not. I was expecting an audience of engineers, so forgive me. Engineers are really good at embodying, at mining what they embody and knowing what they know, and it's a very strong culture. And of course, it generates a lot of stuff. It generates a lot of tech and a lot of functions. I would posit that Microsoft, like a lot of tech companies, is not as good at mining cultures outside itself, at mining cultures outside the engineering culture. It doesn't mine the existential all that well. Now, Nike has that capability. And there's a guy in New York, it's very interesting, we all know about Nike Plus and the Nike Fuel Ban. Well, that stuff, the mining of the communities of runners and what they really want and what they really need happened in New York with a guy named Bob Greenberg at a place called RGA. And Bob Greenberg, who's a very strange fellow, he's about, I don't know, somewhere between 65 and 100, bald with long, scraggly white hair, crown of white hair, who wears only black. And I think he actually is into motorcycles, but I can't tell, with a lot of silver jewelry. Okay. And he started out in LA doing movies. And he's basically reinvented his business and his life every 10 years. He invented it recently again. And we could talk about this later. He broke all of RGA, it's up to like 1,500 people, into different groups of 150. And that 150 is very significant. I didn't put this in as a provocation, but we should talk about what is important in terms of a team. Okay, so it was Bob Greenberg in New York who was able to find out what is meaningful, truly meaningful, for the runners who use Nike and come up with Nike Plus and Nike Fuel Band. Okay, so what do I mean by the existential? Most creativity, I've found, that is welcomed by people as meaningful in their lives comes simply from connecting 2 or 3 dots. It's not the 100 things that come out of brainstorming, that swarm of yellow stickies that we all sort of live through continually. It's what you know connecting to 1 or 2 other things out there. So it's like cars plus the net equals, cars plus the net equals Zipcar. I'm sorry, cars plus sharing plus the net equals Zipcar. Green plus cool equals method. I like this because this is not an example of connecting to another technology. This is connecting to 2 value systems. 2 guys, one guy was a researcher for Carnegie Mellon or Carnegie something on weather patterns. And another guy, a buddy of his, who was a junior ad agency guy. And they were in California. No one read any of the reports on sustainability, so that guy was miserable. And anyone who knows anything about the ad business knows that being a junior ad executive is just a life of misery. And they got together, and apparently their house was really dirty, and they decided to do something in detergents. God knows where that came from. But what they connected was, they wanted detergents, they wanted something sustainable that wasn't brown and ugly and painful to use. They wanted it to be normal. They wanted to normalize sustainability. That was their culture. And so they connected, the limits to growth and all the flagellation about saving the planet to a different aesthetic, a different value system. And they came up with a whole new company method, and their products are pretty cool. Okay, so there's that. So how about connecting shoe shopping with the net? And you get Zappos and a really manic CEO, if you've ever seen him perform. He's very happy. He's so happy. Okay. And then my latest favorite is connecting eyeglasses to fashion, to really trying to be cheap, to the net, and it gets you Warby Parker. So I don't know if you've ever used Warby Parker to buy glasses. I gave a talk last week to the Vision Association. Vision Association is a trade association of all the companies that are involved in glasses. So you have this, and you have eye doctors, you have hospitals. It's an enormous industry. Who knew? So I go and talk to about 400 of them and tell them about what we're talking about here, disruption, what you need to do, why you shouldn't have anxiety about creativity, and there are pathways out of your predicament, which is your industry is falling apart because of new technologies and new demographics. And so I gave them a message of hope. I also asked them, well, everyone is here except one player. Who's not here? They didn't invite Warby Parker. right? So it was fascinating to see that the Vision Association wouldn't invite someone who's clearly, in their business that is disrupting them. They couldn't do it. They couldn't bring themselves to do it. It's fascinating. Okay, so in this process, the first thing you need to know is what is meaningful in the culture you're trying to connect your dot to. Okay, it's important to know what is important to your cohort group because you embody that knowledge. But then you also have to know what is important to the other group that you want to get into, that you want to sell something to, that you want to embrace, that you want to engage with. Now, it's not easy, and sometimes it's very difficult. And lots of people say, most innovation comes from small startups these days. I mean, think of all the innovations that have changed our lives. Where do they come from? Startups that scaled, right? However, there are some companies that, in fact, have changed dramatically. IBM, I love the story of IBM. When I was growing up, this was, in fact, the standard, right? And by the 80s, IBM was roadkill. IBM, the stock was falling apart. Wall Street wanted to break them up, right? Just like they wanted to break up Microsoft. And by some miracle, and I don't know how this happened, the board of directors actually chose, unlike HP's board of directors, they actually chose a new CEO, and they made a very interesting decision. They brought in someone who was not an engineer, who was not an IBMer, 20-year IBMer, who was in fact Lou Gerstner from RJR Nabisco, a food and tobacco company. It's like, what is that all about? Okay, how could that person possibly do anything for IBM? Well, the first thing Gerstner did when he became CEO of IBM was go away from IBM. He actually spent about 1 day in IBM and then hit the road. And he spent, I think, 6 months or 9 months on the road talking to IBM's customers, not IBM. He got into their culture. He asked them what was meaningful to them and what they needed from something like IBM. And what they told him in the end was, look, we need help. That's all he said. We need help. We need help in making decisions. We need help in dealing with our customers. What we don't really need are computers, per se. We don't need heavy metal. We don't need mainframes. We need help, to the degree that, some metal does the trick, that's fine. But what we need from you is help with our business. And so he went back to IBM and he said, well, didn't you guys start out by, putting together data and presenting it to businesses to help them make decisions? And didn't you sort of get lost along the way with an obsession with mainframe computers? And that business has gone to hell. So let's go back to our roots. Let's go back to being a company that helps, that services. And he turned IBM from a heavy metal company that sold things to a service company that helped its clients. It was a dramatic change. It took about 5 years or 10 years. He fired half the staff, which is another issue we could talk about. I mean, he dramatically changed the culture by changing the people, some of the people. But he basically saved IBM, and he reframed the entire company. It's a fascinating, to me, example, and it's a rare example, but it is an example of deep cultural change happening in a very complex organization. So I kind of like the IBM example. Okay. Let's go back to what I mean by meaning. In understanding the deep meaning of culture, you need to know the patterns. You need to know what the deep patterns are in that culture. What exists that's normal and average and conventional, and what's not there, what's missing. what's an opportunity for you, what's outside the conventional. I call this process of finding what's not there donut thinking. You're looking for the donut. First you have to find the pattern. That's very essential, and it takes a long time sometimes to find the pattern. And then you have to begin to look for what's not there. Now, I'm a birder. I do a lot of bird watching. And birders train to look for what's not there. You look for the rare bird, the odd duck. That's what you're doing. The big thrill for a birder is to find the rarity, what shouldn't be there during that season, during that time. And you're always looking for it. It's not like, what's his name, who did the Black Swan? Tassim Taleb, thank you. Who put together a whole economic theory about how black swans come out of the blue, unexpected, do terrible things, and you have to deal with it. He's got a second book on resilience. Resilience is very hot these days. Birders train to look for the black swan. I saw a black swan in Singapore. It was a big thrill, but I wasn't really surprised. You know, for one thing, Australia is close to Singapore, and the black swan is an Australian bird. But we train to look for what's not there. We train to look for the donut hole. And we train to see the patterns and what's not in the pattern. And for a business or an organization, what's not there is very often your opportunity, very often for you to come in and provide something. So, donut thinking is particularly important today. Everyone, let me slow down here. I think it's very important today because everyone is fast following social media. Everyone is fast following Facebook into the space of social media. Google is, Microsoft is, Twitter is. They're all shoveling their gifts over the wall into the river of social media. But I have to say, like most of us, you know, I'm good at one thing or maybe two. One of the things I'm good at is seeing at the edges what's not there. I'm a birder. And I noticed this year that a lot of my students are getting off social media. There are some rituals in life that still have meaning, deep meaning, and New Year's resolutions are really still very meaningful to people. Unless they, you know, their New Year's resolution is to drink more water, which is apparently one of the top New Year's resolutions in America. I always ask my students at the end, yeah, it is. So I asked them at the turn of the year, in the next year, what your New Year's resolution is. And a lot of them this year, surprisingly, said, well, I'm getting off Facebook. You know, I'm disconnecting. And some of them said, I'm getting rid of my smartphone, I'm just going to get a regular phone. You know, these are the most tattooed, the most pierced, the coolest, the ones who really live in really shitty neighborhoods of New York, which is getting very rare. It's very hard to find a slummy area of New York. They found them. So they're really at the edge. And so I've talked with them and I said, well, you know, what's all this about? And it gets back to what they are looking for in terms of meaning in their lives. And they're looking elsewhere for deep meaning in their lives. They're looking away from being hyper-connected to so many things, to so many people. I don't know where they're going, but I think this is significant. And I think this is one of those donut holes that it's opening up for people to begin to examine. I suspect that if it's real and it opens up into something large, there'll be enormous opportunities. But you have to not be a fast follower. You have to actually be into that culture, understand it, and engage. Okay. So I'm going to play two clips. My favorite clip is from Zero Dark 30, which is a great movie. It got robbed at the Academy Awards. It's so much better than Argo. Okay? I'm going to play this twice. And I think this clip exemplifies and shows, just in 60 seconds, a lot of the skills that I talk about in the book, and a lot of the things that I think we need to do. Here we go.
What else have you done for us besides Bin Laden?
I've done nothing else.
The movie takes you behind the scenes on the decade-long hunt that led to finding the world's most dangerous man.
I want to make something absolutely clear. There's nobody else coming to the rescue. There was just us.
No one really knows what it's like to disappear into the shadows as a CIA operative in that part of the world.
I need a favor.
Why I should help you? How come you only call me when you need help?
How about a V10 Lamborghini?
I just need a phone number.
There were a lot of people across the world involved in the hunt for Bin Laden.
We're within 10 meters of it. He's here somewhere.
We couldn't capture every aspect of that, but we tried to capture the scope.
He's called from 6 different payphones from 2 different cities, never using the same phone twice.
The Al-Qaeda operative's behavior was so specific and designed to avoid detection that it led the CIA to them.
He's living in a city. You can't run a global network of interconnected cells from a cave.
They were...
Okay. I'll play this one more time. I like this for lots of reasons. I mean, first of all, there is no one else, right? That's the message we all need to realize. There's no one else who's going to save us, whether it's our personal career or our company or our industry. There's no one else, so it's up to us. And it was up to them. I love this particular clip because you can see in this that the analyst, Maya, okay, finds Osama by reframing, by taking the frame and reframing the CIA's entire narrative story of Osama. So the CIA has a story about him. That story is he's inaccessible, in a cave, far away. We're never going to get him. So they have another frame. They have another story about him. The way they engage Osama is to look for the bombers, the suicide bombers, that are going to come and kill us. So the only way we can engage him is to try and intercept these bad guys, these killers. Okay. She says, Maya, who, by the way, is questioned by the head of The Sopranos, right, Tony? Who's now the head of the CIA in the movie. I didn't catch that. He's looking at her, you know, here's a woman in the CIA, fairly young woman, and he says, basically, who are you? What have you ever done? What else have you done for us? Looking for credibility. And she says, I've done nothing else. I've done nothing else for 10 years. She immersed herself for 10 years. She knew the patterns. She knew the deep patterns, all the patterns of Osama and Al-Qaeda. And she knew what was aberrant, what was not there, the donut hole. And to her, there was this guy who was not a suicide bomber, going around different cities, making phone calls from public phones. I mean, who uses a public phone, not a cell phone? And never using the same phone twice, right? Something was different from the pattern. Something was different. So she said, well, you know, why are we only looking for suicide bombers? Let's look for this kind of guy, this person. This is the type of person who's carrying information. He's a courier. He's not a killer. Look for couriers. She changed the frame of their engagement with Osama and Al-Qaeda. Okay? And she says in the movie, you know, stop and think for a moment. You know, how in the world do you run an international organization based on cells from a cave? You can't do it. It's not going to happen. So she reframed the story of the CIA's engagement with Osama and opened up the possibility that he's in a city. Those two things led to the capture of Osama bin Laden. Her reframing of their engagement with him and of the overall story. I want to play this one more time because there's one more lesson in here. Let's see. Okay.
What else have you done for us besides Bin Laden?
I've done nothing else.
The movie takes you behind the scenes on the decade-long hunt that led to finding the world's most dangerous man.
I want to make something absolutely clear. There's nobody else coming to the rescue. There was just us.
No one really knows what it's like to disappear into the shadows as a CIA operative in that part of the world.
I need a favor.
Why I should help you? How come you only call me when you need help?
How How about a V10 Lamborghini?
I just need a phone number.
There were a lot of people across the world involved in the hunt for bin Laden.
We're within 10 meters of it. He's here somewhere.
We couldn't capture every aspect of that, but we tried to capture the scope.
He's called from 6 different payphones from 2 different cities, never using the same phone twice.
The Al-Qaeda operative's behavior was so specific and designed to avoid detection that it led the CIA to them.
He's living in a city. You can't run a global network of interconnected cells from a cave.
They were
Okay. The other thing that I really liked about this was the Lamborghini. So they need a number from this informant, this Pakistani guy informant. How do you get that? Well, somehow you had to know what he wanted. They didn't offer him a BMW or a Cadillac. They offered him what he wanted, what was meaningful to him, which was a D10, V10 Lamborghini, right? And they got it. They got the number in exchange for the Lamborghini. Again, it's incredibly important to know what is meaningful for the other person, for the other culture, for you to engage successfully in that culture. Knowing when to give a Lamborghini or not is key, I think, to creativity, to finding new things, new opportunities, and generating new economic value. We could call that the Lamborghini effect. I want to play one more final video. And wrap up after that. This video is from a conference in India that I attended about 2 years ago. It's called the Dream In Conference. Okay, so it's a little slick, but it's okay. You know, if you ask people what they need, they'll give you a list. They'll give you a list of, maybe 10 things or sometimes 20. And if you ask them what they need in the morning, and you ask them what they need at night, they'll give you a different list. If you ask them what they dream about, they will give you 2 or 3 things. And they'll stick to it. They won't change it. It has deep meaning to people, what they aspire to, what they dream about. This is a conference put on by this great company in India called Idiom. It's like the IDEO of India, Idiom. It's a great innovation consultancy that does a lot of business model innovation. And I went to this conference. What they did, as you could see, they gathered about 100, 150 students, trained them to be videographers and interviewers, and sent them out to talk to people in their own language, local languages, throughout India, mostly northern India, a little bit of South India, and basically collect their dreams. And they brought back thousands of these things, and they collated them. The 4 top dreams that people had out of this data was that people dreamt of more education, they dreamt of women's rights, they dreamt of serving their nation, either in the military or the police, and they dreamt of starting their own businesses. Those are the 4 top dreams. They never dreamt of more food. They never dreamt of more vaccines. They never dreamt of cleaner water. They never dreamt of better housing. These are the typical needs that we think of when you're talking about the bottom of the pyramid and blah, 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 blah. Their dreams were different. Their aspirations were very different. And I was really struck by this. I didn't expect it. And they've had this conference again in Brazil, and they've had it they're about to do it in China, and they've had the same sort of results. The dreams are consistent. They're very specific. When they asked the question, they asked for a couple of dreams, or it was an open-ended question, and people only gave 1 or 2 dreams, actually, maybe 3. And so, as part of this conference now, I'm bringing this to emphasize the need to find what's meaningful in different cultures. And there are different ways of doing that. Asking people about their dreams is one way to find what's meaningful. It's a trick on one level. It's a ritual or ceremony in another, but it's a meaningful way, it's a meaningful pathway to get to what is meaningful to people in order to engage them, in order to do what you want with them. As an after thing to this, I'm involved in coming together with various people to come up with plans to enable these dreams. 2/3 of them are business plans, and about 1/3 of them will be sort of nonprofit. The business plans will involve private capital, government capital, crowdfunding, crowdsourcing, and various other things. So it's a very interesting model based on dreams and what we think are meaningful things coming out of people. The gift here is their gift of their dreams to us to enable, as opposed to our giving them gifts of our technology. It's a different dynamic, and we'll see how it goes. So I talk a lot about framing in my book, framing and reframing. I think of the 5 creative competencies I sort of list in the book, I think framing and reframing are the most powerful. And yeah, they're the most powerful. And just to recap, I talk about narrative framing, the framing of the larger story within which we make sense of the world, within which we take the data that we get from day to day and put it into that context. That's what gives us our meaning. The story is the context. We create our identity through it. And you can change that story. You can reframe that narrative. And the other frame that I talk about is the engagement framing, how we engage. I don't know, my parents were born into groups that pretty much defined their engagement. They were social groups. They had about a dozen of them or whatever. We create our own groups now. We create dozens of them. We shut them down, we start them up. We have all kinds of digital groups that we participate in, and we engage in. And we engage in them in very different ways, right? I mean, this is a weird engagement. So the idea that we should understand that we have many engagements, that we frame them all deliberately and differently, and that we can reframe them, empowers us, gives us a sense of what we can do and how we can change it. So I would say that Microsoft has very clear narrative and engagement frames, and you might just take a moment to ponder whether if some of them should be reframed. As Microsoft pushes out new technologies as gifts to humanity, it could help to know just what people really think and desire. There's a guy, Frank Knight, Chicago school economist known mostly for his work on options trading. He loved to talk about uncertainty and risk. And he said that social uncertainty and chance were the real sources of knowledge, opportunity, and profits. He said that focusing on the wants of people was insufficient. And here's his quote, or my quote of him. The chief thing, which the common sense individual actually wants, is not satisfaction of the wants which he has, but more and better wants. So Microsoft is doing doing great, but doesn't know what we really want, what people out there really want. And let's see. Final slide is just a word cloud of things that are in the book that we could talk about. But I think we should end this now, and we've had a bunch of videos and a lot of blah blah, and open it up to discussions about any provocation you want to talk about. Thank you very much. And if you got to peel away, peel away.
Quick question. So you're talking about what people want and listening to that, right? Now, how do you distill the wants that are meaningful and that are beneficial to them, and just the wants that are just superfluous or are not like beneficial to them in the first place?
Yeah, I mean, it gets to the heart of the heart of assessment, right? How do you assess these things? I'm not going to give you a simple answer. I'm going to say that there are at least two ways of doing it, and one way is through data. Amassing lots of data. Now we have the capability of amassing lots of data, and I've seen some stuff today that is just wonderful, based around the data. My only caution with this approach, and that's a major engineering approach, is that data without context is less meaningful than you think. You need to really combine the data with the context to get a much deeper and richer picture of what's going on. On the other hand, there are lots of qualitative assessments and qualitative techniques that people have been using for a long, long time that get you very deep into the meaning of cultures and societies. And they're accessible. You can bring in people who know how to do this. I'm sure there are hundreds of people at Microsoft and maybe 50 people sitting here who know how to do this. And their assessment of what is meaningful in a culture is pretty good. One of the things that strikes me is that creativity or things that are meaningful are very often must be judged within a specific domain of knowledge. So if you turn on TV today, there are a million reality shows of people dancing and singing, and the structure is you have people out there trying to be their most creative and their best, and they're being assessed by a jury of 3 or 4 people. And research shows that within specific domains, expert juries of 2 or 3 people have an amazingly, great success rate at finding out what is truly creative and what is truly meaningful. They have this ability, they know the patterns. They know the patterns. So, and then they know what's outside the pattern, right? So you could do that through data, you could do that through other means, or simply you could do it through data, you could do it through expert panels. I'm sure that there are other ways of doing it. You're asking the right question, but there are several answers, and they are at hand. Yeah.
It seems like empathy is a real key to understanding these wants. Do you have any takeaways or thoughts on that?
Yeah, empathy is key. And empathy is pretty squishy, My sense, let me give you my critique of empathy and a critique of experience. The concepts of these things. How do I mean? I think empathy is a learned behavior. It's not intuitive, it's learned, like most other things. And what you're doing is quieting down and listening enough to learn enough about patterns. In the end, empathy is simply a technique to get to meaning, and the meaning is patterns. Knowing what's real, what's average, what's common, what's different, and there are different ways of doing it. Empathetic techniques are you could find out how to do it, but basically, in my classroom, it's how do I put this? It's going to sound strange. I'll really personalize it, right? So Parsons is unique in that it has a very, very special student body. A third are European and Brazilian, a third are Asian, and a third are American. In the classroom, it's the Americans who are, whoa, in your face. It's what we do. And the Brazilians are pretty much in your face too. The Europeans are a bit more reserved, but they're there. And the Asian students they're not in your face. And they're not supposed to be in their culture. And if you continue to just pick on the people who are in your face, other people are basically excluded. And you evaluate them only on what they produce on paper or on video. If you quiet down and just let people talk, they will talk. They will very often say, well, I can't quite express it, but, and then it comes out. There are ways of eliciting the meaning that we talk about empathy, but it's basically eliciting the information that provides you with the meaning. I don't know. Yeah.
Can I comment? So my son, when he was at Berkeley, worked for a company called Jump. Which Deb Patnaik written a book called Wired to Care, the importance of empathy, and what they used to do was need finding with the various organizations. Yes. So they specifically did rather like your dream, capturing dreams. They went out capturing what customers actually want. The story I'd like to tell is that, they hired lots of computer scientists from universities, and they noticed that we're all using Windows machines. And they said, got these cool Macs, we should all use these. And the lesson was, we should use the machines that our customers use. Yes, exactly. So they have to have empathy with their customers and suffer with them with Windows.
Well, exactly. I mean, part of it is having good eyes and good ears. Sorry, if you become a birder, this will all become intuitive to you. But I mean, actually using your eyes and your ears deeply and giving it the time to actually see and hear allows you to connect. I mean, and not imposing. I mean, we all think our shit is great, and we think everyone else should be using it because it's so great. And very often it is greater than theirs, but that doesn't mean, So that's a very good example. And Dev is Indian, so he's an Indian from Poughkeepsie. Yeah.
So kind of an extension on that, and an observation here in an engineering culture. A lot of the background has been pattern matching, connecting dots, and that's what I've done for a very long time. The emotional aspect, though, is you have to be egoless when you're doing that. And I think as creatives, we need to we tend to, as you get professional, learn to keep yourself sometimes out of the equation, to really see the dots and patterns. And when we've been working at times with engineers who don't have as much experience lateral thinking, but they're very, very good vertical thinking. Yeah. They don't realize when they've fallen in love with their own solutions. And a lot of times as professional designers, you have to learn when to throw away when to kill your darlings, like as they say, right? So when you meant anti-disciplinary teams, can you explain a little bit more on that? Because I think we're in agreement, but I just want to make sure.
Yeah, I was having a two-way distance learning conversation with Bill Buxton about, what the hell should I be talking about today? And he said, well, talk about the nature of teams. We've all sort of been brought up with the idea that we need multidisciplinary teams, right? And that's the way to go. And it still sounds kind of right. But one of the things that happens, and I've seen this in my own, teams, often we will put together a team where, we want to work well together. and we want to trust each other, and we want to really be able to play together. These are all the elements of what a great team is supposed to do. And the result is there's no friction. There's no tension. We all are on the same path. And that has consequences. If you look again at a lot of the innovations that have changed our lives, they have come from founders who were basically 2 people, 3 people, dyads. The dyadic relationship is really fundamental to what we got out of Apple and Google and Facebook. And with the exception of Google, they all broke apart. In the end, there was a lot of tension and anger, but they were incredibly creative. So the cautionary note in that is that we should be a little careful when we put our teams together that we're not too smooth and too into gear and that we mesh too well. We should throw a little dirt in that, have a little friction in it, and maybe not be so multi-smoothie and bring in some people who will shake things up, who have a radically different perspective, and are anti-disciplinary as opposed to multi. It's just a thought. I mean, it's an early thought, and I have to thank Bill for, I think he knows more what he's talking about here at Microsoft than he let on. But I like the idea. I like the idea of going too far in bringing a team that works so well together, because that's what we all talk about, the great jazz team. But when you actually look at great, quartets or jazz bands over a period of 20 years, a lot of shit's going on in there. People are fighting, they're making love to each other's whatever spouses. There's tension, it breaks up, new people come in, the drummer drops out. There's a lot of stuff that's going on in that team. They're still wildly creative, but it's not smooth and easy. So maybe it shouldn't be so smooth and easy.
On a mid-year review, when they're saying we're too aggressive, we can just say we're moving the needle forward on creativity.
Exactly.
All right.
Yeah.
So I was curious what your take on the sort of startup scene. We have a little startup scene here in Seattle, Silicon Valley. You're from New York. I read a post recently that said that it seemed like a lot of the startups coming out this day are trying to find fantastic ways to serve advertisements to people. It's basically that was a lot of focus, and there's a lot of sameness.
Yeah.
Neat new things that allows us to put banner ads in front of you.
Yeah.
And along the lines of your thought of donut thinking, what is it that we're not seeing? Let's say that I wanted to engage, or we or somebody wanted to engage in donut thinking for the startup type of thing, whether it be internal Microsoft or whatever. What advice would you give in the context of your talk and the book? And maybe just read your book, but beyond that.
Definitely read my book. First buy it, and then read it. That's a series of questions. Let's go one by one, okay? And I'm going to forget the second or third, so let me start. Okay. There is one of the things that struck me when Occupy was really big in New York last year. And the Tea Party was really big in the U.S. the year before and last year too. They both come from completely different political extremes, but they had 2 things in common. They both hated crony capitalism and said so, and they both loved Steve Jobs and said so. Okay, and these are people from and this way too, in terms of age and color. So they're old and white in certain parts of the country, and they're young and multicolored and multi-whatever with Occupied. But they had these 2 things in common. They hated crony capitalism, and they all liked Steve Jobs. And he died during the occupation, and so there was a physical manifestation. People had candles. It was a really big deal. The whole lower Manhattan was lit up with a vigil to Steve Jobs by the people of Occupied. Didn't get a lot of publicity, but for those of us in New York, and of course half the students at Parsons were down there, so we spent a lot of time down there. It really struck me. There is a huge entrepreneurial surge in America. People are really, many people are really sick of big corporations that they perceive as being corrupt and tied into Washington, and big is bad. And my students, for the first time that I could remember, really want to start their own companies, which is, when I was going to school, I didn't even like money, much less start my own company. And they all want to start their own company, and they all want to make things. That's the other thing. The return of make culture is enormously powerful. We have new technologies. It's all over the place here. But it's all over the place in the art scene. 3D printing of art and clothing and jewelry is huge and gorgeous. And the things that you could do, you can't do otherwise. So it's wildly creative. So there's this entrepreneurial wave going on, and it's overlapping with a make thing. And that's a wonderful opportunity for stuff, for all kinds of stuff. In my book, the whole back portion of the book is about what I call indie capitalism. The replacement of financial capitalism and a capitalism that focuses really only on the shareholder with a very different kind of capitalism. And I connect creativity, which basically creativity has always been the major source of generating economic value. I mean, you could get economic value out of squeezing, out of efficiency. And I think we've been doing that quite a bit over the last 30 years. But the greater profits come from the new. And creativity generates more economic value per whatever measurement you want to put around it than efficiency. And so I'm trying to reconnect creativity and capitalism again within the context of these new waves of entrepreneurialism among the young and making. And I think that's hugely powerful. That's one of these opportunities where if you find it, to find the right product or service or whatever, it's going to take off. It's going to be wildly profitable. It's very strange. You got to take off?
No.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, to me, it's wild. It's crazy that HP, the great printer company, is not into 3D printing. You just think about that. It's fucking crazy, right? And the reason is what I've been talking about. They can't get out of themselves. They've lost the whole culture. They killed their culture of organic innovation, which was so wild and great. I mean, here was a company that, they had all these great labs, and whatever came out of those labs, whatever they could scale and make commercializable, they did. So they went from scientific instruments to inkjet computers they were just bouncing around. It didn't matter. People were having such great fun in these labs. And as a company, they were having, wild profits while it went on. And then it's over. And then you have this incredible opportunity, and they don't even see it. So someone else is going to do that. Anyhow, that answers one of your questions. I'm not quite sure what the others were. But.
I just want to point out, at the back of the room, we have copies of this book. It's really terrific, and there's a limited number of books that Microsoft Research subsidizes it. So those are $10, and the rest are retail. So I highly encourage you to grab a book. Bruce will be signing them, but he can still do questions while you guys are waiting in line to get the book.
Sure. The other crazy thing in the world, books sell for I think that book on Amazon is whatever, $17. You think about it, $17 for a book it's basically free. And of course the ebook is even less. Valuation in our society is just wildly bizarre. So that comes out for me as an author. It's very strange. Other questions? Yeah. Yeah.
So circling back to need and meaning, I can definitely see the distinction that you're drawing between meanings which seem, like dreams that seem to persist and speak to richer things in our lives. But some of the needs that you mentioned, water, decent housing, medication that saves lives, are very real needs. So what? How do we connect those two when those are both present? So the meaning in our lives is a need as well. So how are we addressing those? Is that becoming a hierarchical thing, or are we speaking just to opportunity?
I spoke at a big gathering of people who are into social innovation, which is really hot, right? The whole space of social innovation is growing. Business schools, it's the fastest growing, and design schools. And in fact, social innovation, which was sort of over here, is kind of morphing. You can't really tell half the time what is a commercial enterprise and what is a social innovation, because they're all kind of markety. They use markets, and profits are real. So you have nonprofit profits, profits, whatever. So I was at a conference, and we were talking about this. And the answer is, I don't know. The answer is we all have to be aware of our own value system and political system and what we impose on people. Because all the social innovation people, well, they're into providing, clean water and food. And because people obviously need it in certain places around the world. But the question is, what if those people have other desires? Do you listen to them and satisfy their higher order desires? Or do you say, well, your dreams are all right, but here, eat this? I mean, I don't have an answer, but I think we all have to at least be aware of the value systems being expressed on both sides of that exchange, and on the decision-making process, and on the weight you give to the others' decisions and values. Very often that's not the case. And I'm speaking as a ex-Peace Corps volunteer, former Peace Corps volunteer. So, but it's a key question. Do you want to?
Yeah. Assuming that you've done the work to identify the meaning you want to go out and address, you know the audience, you know some of the problems you want to go solve. Could you speak specifically to how you go create a new solution? You've mentioned one technique, which is donut thinking. What other arrows?
Well, if you find something that's meaningful, and well, let's go to the dreaming thing, because it gives us some bit more concrete. So, I really wanted to show you the videos of some of the people who were talking, but I just couldn't make that happen because I didn't know how to make it happen. I was really struck by two things. One, they talked with a lot of children about their dreams. And almost invariably, the kids wanted more education. And the reason was a lot of children go to school for until they're 8 or 9 or 10, and then they're pulled out of school to work because the family needs the money. But they want that education. But they can't go to school again because they still have to work. So what is meaningful to these kids is learning in an environment where they can go in and out for an hour or two a day and then go back to work. And our job in this particular is to find a way to provide that. And the business plan that my group came up with was in a lot of the cities and a lot of the towns. There are kiosks, there are internet kiosks, basically, that are very popular. And you go there, and one of the great, Indians are hugely innovative. And they have this Jugaad innovation where they take the constraints and they innovate around them. And one of the things that they do so well there is they macro slice. So, cell phone calls are very, very cheap. And using the internet can be very, very inexpensive for a short amount of time. And so we built up a business plan around trying to use these kiosks as schools for certain hours of the day so that these kids can come in before, during, after, however it works for them, and they could actually plug into lesson plans, online, or actually having people there to work with them on lessons. So we're trying to take their dreams and implement plans around their dreams that actually work to satisfy them. Do you want me to abstract that a little bit? Or does that work for you? So you get the dreams, you get the meaningful dreams, you get what's meaningful about it, okay? They have to, I guess, be meaningful in a sense of concrete enough to do something about it. Like if I dreamt I wanted to be an astronaut and I had glasses, not much I could do about it. But if I'm dreaming about education, one can provide that. The next step is finding novel ways of providing it.
Yeah, that was what I was wondering, is specifically on that find novel ways.
Yeah.
What techniques, in addition to the donut thinking, do you find effective?
Yeah, that's one of the things I don't go into in the book, and it's a very interesting question. And sounds like it would make for another book, right? So I'm going to think about that. Okay. That's the part where you start using your imagination and think about delivery systems. Okay, but I don't have anything significant to say about that.
Bruce,
yeah.
To make that the last question.
Yeah, that's it. One more question.
One more question?
One more question, we'll make that the last question.
Okay.
Okay.
So the difference between, I guess, understanding and making sure you're looking at the right donut hole and making meaning, like, or innovating, I think. So it's substitute those words in a way. But what do you think Microsoft's issue is? Is it that we're looking at the wrong donut, not seeing the right donut holes, or that we're not innovating in the right way?
With some couple of great exceptions, my sense is there was, that period of 10, 20 years where Microsoft was a revolutionary leader, providing incredibly meaningful things to people in a deeply significant way. And then it became mostly a fast follower, an excellent fast follower, but basically a follower of other trends and other vehicles, doing it as well in a different way, as well in a different platform. Xbox and Keynote, they're exceptions. But basically, that's how I perceive it. And I think that's kind of been true for the last 20 years, let's say. And I would argue that now that hierarchy is beginning to break up. The Apple thing is beginning to break up. Even the social media, perhaps, is beginning to break up. And other opportunities are beginning to emerge. And if you can get out of, a fast follower culture, there might be incredible opportunities for revolution again. That's all I'm saying. I don't have enough information and deep cultural knowledge of Microsoft to say anything more than that.
Okay, let's give Bruce a big hand. Thank you for coming.